Hi, Gene here with today's thought. And well, this is a little unfortunate that I'm recording this on a Friday and you're seeing it on a Monday, because I'm going to report some breaking news that I just got, but it won't be breaking. Well, it won't be breaking news by Monday, depending on how much it gets reported. What's interesting about well, you already know from the title what I'll be talking about, but I read some of the English language Israeli papers, and I am not seeing this at all. We're talking about the Middle East today, Israel and Hamas, Gaza. This story comes from an American website, the Free Beacon. It's called the Washington Free Beacon. And well, let's go right to the story. I hope it's true personally, but I'll just give you the headline. As I always do, I link to the whole story in the description. You can read it for yourself. The reason I'm giving some credibility to it is because this is a reputable news site, number one. They get their stories right. And number two, the amount of detail in this story. I'm going to just give you, a few paragraphs directly from that article, but the entire article is much longer and much detail, so I put credence in this. We'll see how it turns out. According to the article, we won't know for sure for 4 to 6 weeks whether this turns out, and it may not happen at all. I'll have comments on that too, depending on what Hamas does or does not do. I'll fill you in on that after I fill you in on this article. So let's go. Exclusive. Israel to resume war in Gaza and eradicate Hamas, cutting off aid and bombarding Strip with troops. Israeli decision makers plan to resume the Gaza war in 4 to 6 weeks with overwhelming force, sending in tens of thousands of troops to conquer the entire Strip in a single coordinated offensive against Hamas. Incoming military chief of staff Eyal Zamir has, at the direction of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Defense Minister Israel Katz, started developing the plan, according to several current and former Israeli officials with knowledge of high-level discussions. Under the plan, Israel will deploy more troops to Gaza than it has to this point in the war, over 50,000, before relocating the civilian population to humanitarian zones and waging a ruthless ground campaign against Palestinian terrorists across the rest of the Strip. We're going to see 4 to 5 divisions simultaneously attack in the north, in the center, and in the south to occupy every area and clear out the enemy, said Hetzi Nechama, a former Israeli colonel who co-authored the General's Plan, an influential proposal for a staged siege of Gaza. It will look different than what we saw in the war until now. It's going to be decisive, said Amir Avivi, a former Israeli brigadier general who has advised the Israeli government and military during the war. Israel will use every tool it has to conquer Gaza and eradicate Hamas. The plan starts with a wave of airstrikes on Gaza and a reduction of humanitarian aid to Gaza, the sources said. There will be no aid outside the humanitarian zone, said Kobi Michal, I assume it's pronounced in Hebrew, a former head of the Palestinian desk at Israel's Strategic Affairs Ministry, and before that, a senior Israeli military intelligence official. This will prevent Hamas from continuing to steal all the humanitarian aid and will increase pressure on the group through the local population. Israel's plan to resume the war comes on the heels of a string of military and diplomatic successes that leave the Jewish state less constrained than at any previous point in the past 17 months of war. Hezbollah, that's in Lebanon, agreed in November to a humiliating ceasefire with Israel, easing pressure on Israel's overstretched army. We always had divisions in the north, and now we don't need divisions in the north because Hezbollah is not a threat, said Nechama. Now we can take those divisions and put them all in Gaza at the same time, and this is very important. No kidding. Yeah, that is very important. So a couple of things you should know, that Israeli, they are negotiating with Hamas now. Remember, there were supposed to be 3 stages to this whole ceasefire business, and phase 1 is supposed to end now, and then go to a phase 2 where Israel agrees to withdraw completely from Gaza, and then all the rest of the hostages would be freed, dead and alive. So what Israel wants to do is extend phase 1 for another 6 weeks, and not go and get more hostages back without going to this phase 2. And the last I read, Hamas is not agreeing to that. And well, the general feeling is that the Israelis they're fed up with Hamas, and see, Israel is getting pressure, which I've said in the past I don't understand. I mean, put the whole country of Israel at risk to get these hostages back, half of whom are dead. And to me, that makes no sense. And well, if Hamas were to kill any more hostages, I mean, they kind of lose. Well, maybe they don't lose their leverage, because again, I don't understand. The Israelis seem to be willing to give up as much to get a dead body back as to get back a living hostage, which I would hope our country would never do something like that. But I'm sure you read the story of the family, the Bibas family, the mother and the 2 children who were murdered. That I think is a turning point, because, well, see, there's a Netanyahu factor in this also, you have to understand, because there are these hostage families that they have an organization, and they're saying, we get all the hostages back, give up, surrender, do whatever you have to do to get them all back. But then you have another group of families that you don't read as much because the Israeli press is overwhelmingly left wing, and they're saying, we grieve for our dead, and we would like our living, family relatives back, but not if it's going to mean that there's a risk that other families could suffer the same fate going in the future if we give in to Hamas. And they're saying, don't give in. And you can be pretty sure that the families, the Surrender Caucus, for whom I have great sympathy for their loss, but no respect, I'll be frank about that, they're on the left, and the ones that want to understand the importance of eradicating Hamas, they're on the right. And so it's as much an anti-Netanyahu group on the one side and a pro-Netanyahu group on the other side. It's left versus right also. There's another factor, because the left, they want to discredit Netanyahu and force him out of office. So that's a factor too. But there's also, as I just quoted to you, Hezbollah was firing rockets from the north, and there were Israeli troops stationed on the north, but they went in eventually and forced Hezbollah to essentially surrender. But they called it a ceasefire, but Hezbollah had to retreat above the Litani River, which is about 19 to 20 miles north of Israel, in other words, out of rocket range. And the Israelis, a few have tried to trickle back and tried to bring weapons back, and the Israelis, they've been, with airstrikes, been eliminating them. And in the meantime, they've been discovering weapons in South Lebanon. So Hezbollah is no longer a threat. So you have all these troops that were in the north now can move south. And you have to remember that Israel is very small. There was a story, I believe it was true, George Bush was, there's something that the Israelis do when they have foreigners come to visit sometime for the first time, what they call the helicopter ride. You get in a helicopter, they take you up a short distance, and they say, you see there, you see there, you see there, you see. Those are the borders of Israel. That's how small the country is. And George Bush said, well, hell, in Texas we have driveways that are bigger than that. So the point I'm making is that even if all the troops come south, and then if Hezbollah against all odds, were to launch another attack, the troops could move north in very short. It's not like us, where we have to send troops across the sea if we bring our troops back. They're just a couple hours away. So it's a whole different story there. But the point is, they have all these troops there. And what they're going to do now, because what's significant is, as you heard in that quote, one of the quotes, that Israel is going to attack in all areas of Gaza. They had been kind of surgical. They've been avoiding areas where they believe the hostages are, to avoid hurting the hostages. But it looks like they're going to go after they're really going to do it. They're going to go after every part of Gaza, and moving people into humanitarian zones. So it's not the Trump plan of moving them out of Gaza, although they should go to Sinai, right next door in Egypt, even if it's only temporary, and get them out of the way. But they're going to move the people into humanitarian zones to leave the Israelis free to operate in the rest of the country without, well, they have to worry about their hostages, but they don't have to worry so much about Gaza civilians who support overwhelmingly. Well, no, I saw a poll now. Their support for Hamas is really, I think it's down to 6%, this poll that I saw. Anyways, so that there's one more factor, which is that there was a general, his name was Halevi. He was in charge of the first part of the war. He's been removed and replaced with somebody else who is more aggressive than Halevi. He was always, and there were other people in the government who were reluctant to attack. So they've all been replaced. And so now you have a more aggressive leadership. And then you have, I would also throw in there, as a military matter, I wouldn't worry about dead hostages and live hostages. You've got maybe, I think there's 75 altogether. So about half of those, 35 or whatever, are living. So if you have a pretty wide area, even as small as Gaza, the odds of hitting a hostage are pretty small. So all these factors, to me, as I said at the beginning, I put a lot of credibility into this report, and they should have done that in the very beginning, and it would have gone a lot better for them. But to add one more thing, there's a chance that this won't happen. Everything in this report, if Gaza, reads the riot, listens to the Riot Act as Israel reads it to them, and releases all the hostages and disarms and leaves Gaza. I doubt that, but what you're going to see is what you will see, probably, is, well, it's interesting. You see them now that Israel, there's a ceasefire, you see them marching around in their nice, clean uniforms, but talk about your Geneva Convention. You didn't see those uniforms during the actual fighting. They fought. This will be another story for another day, probably, if this attack happens, because you're going to have the usual suspects in the international community attacking Israel, criticizing Israel, and just if they're attacking, if they're fighting, if Hamas is fighting in civilian clothes, it's not each combatant, each warring party is responsible for caring for their own citizens, keeping their own civilians safe. And one of the ways they're supposed to do that is to wear uniforms. I've read the Geneva Convention, so I know what I'm talking about. To wear uniforms, they're not just for show or for fighting. So that you can easily distinguish the combatants from the civilians, and they're supposed to carry their weapons openly, no concealed weapons. You carry your rifles openly, and if they're not going to do that, it's really not Israel's job to decide who is a civilian and who is not. If somebody's approaching them in what could be a hostile manner, they can shoot them. If they're being shot at from in the middle of a crowd, they don't have to. If a sniper can do it, then they're required to use the least violent means. But if they can't, they're not required to surgically get that terrorist in civilian clothing who is shooting at them to avoid hitting a civilian. It's not their job. They're not required under international law and the Geneva Convention. So when you start hearing Israel is violating, the civilian was killed, they're violating international law, that's wrong. I mean, just pick up a copy of the Geneva Convention. You can get it on the internet, read it yourself. Anyways, that's my thought for today. We'll see what happens, how this pans out. What I say, it's interesting. It's not being reported well, I don't read the Hebrew language press because my Hebrew is not that great. I'm trying to learn, but in the English language, I haven't seen it yet in the Israeli papers, but that could be for purposes of secrecy, but obviously it's not a secret anymore, at least if you're reading the Washington Free Beacon. So we'll see what happens. Thanks for stopping by. If you could subscribe, that would really be great. Your thoughts are always welcome regarding my thoughts, pro or, well, anything you want to talk about in the comment section below the video. You can suggest topics for me to talk about too. That would be nice. Share this video with anyone you think would benefit from it, but most of all, come back and see me again. I would love to see all of you again, and until I do see all of you again, bye.